extremely dense presentation. It was a real pleasure listening to you, just getting the highlights out of the report. And of course, there was so much information, and how you were able to manage to put it in the short slot that we had earmarked for you is absolutely remarkable. Now, the report is available to you. None of you will have read all of it right now. I think we still have a little bit of time ahead of us to digest the full richness of the information in it. But we would nevertheless open now the floor for a question and answer session. If you would like to highlight particular elements, ask specific questions, you would be free now to do so. And for that, I will hand over the chairmanship to Mathieu Bousquet, the acting head of unit for regional cooperation in my directorate, to guide us through this question and answer session. So, Mathieu, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gerhard. So, here we are today, the different groups. We have representative from partner countries, representative from stakeholders, but also representative from the media and journalists. So for the journalists, we have a session just after at 12:30. So I would suggest that first we take the reaction from partner countries and key stakeholders in the energy sector. If you have comments and questions, please raise your hand, use the microphone, introduce yourself, and get the questions or comments if you just want to have only comments. So, who wants to have the first question or comment?
Yes, thank you for all your presentations, which were all informative and very well organized. My name is Eldar Latipov. I'm from Central Europe Energy Partners. Comments I don't have, but I have two little questions. And first question I would like to ask to Ms. Wörsdorfer. And as you know, recently Iran has reached a framework agreement with the US and the EU on lifting of the sanctions, and now the parties are working on it, and until the 30th of June they will have to work out. And in case of reaching the agreement, the sanctions will be lifted, and that means that Iran will be able to export its hydrocarbons to the EU. And in this case, will the EU still prioritize Turkmenistan as a prospective gas exporter over Iran, or will be Iran the priority over Turkmenistan? That's my question. And the second question is to Ms. van der Hoven. How do you see the future and perspective of cooperation of Central Asian and Eastern European countries with EU and Russian Eurasian Economic Union? Will it be less, I don't know, competition, or how do you see, how will it work for these countries? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We take the questions or comments in groups if there are, otherwise I don't see any hand raised. Yes, madam?
Good morning. My name is Biljana Chobanova. I represent the Energy Charter Secretariat. First, I would like to congratulate the International Energy Agency for this really impressive work, for the compilation of so much statistical data, policy data. We know how difficult it is sometimes to collect all the information, and probably most of you know that the Energy Charter Secretariat has been developing investment climate policy reviews and energy efficiency policy reviews for most of the countries present here. And I could note that the conclusions and recommendations of the International Energy Agency go very much in line with our conclusions and recommendations to most of the countries. So I have one question. now, what would be the next step? How do we, all the international organizations working with these countries, how do we support these countries to practically implement all these recommendations? Because sometimes it's a bit disappointing to see such nice reports. I personally have been working and developing 10 energy efficiency policy review reports. And the phase of implementation of the recommendations is sometimes a bit slow. So how do we support the countries to facilitate the improvement in their policy framework? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, yes.
Hello everybody, my name's Giorgio and I'm working for the European Wind Energy Association. I have one general question with respect to the potential of renewable energies in all these countries. Do you see whether there is basically any particular renewable energy which has the potential of growing very much in all these countries that you analyzed? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Dmitry Yermoluk, Commission of Belarus. I'd like to thank all speakers for this extremely interesting presentations. My question goes to Mrs. van der Hoeven. And we all know that, well, the sector of renewables is treated, usually treated as a rather low yield and high risk, so to say, area by private investors. So especially at the early stages of its development, it's highly dependent on public investments and public support. So don't you think in this regard that the countries who still maintain a high share of public involvement into the economy and the energy sector are better positioned in this regard to promote the use of renewables than, for instance, those who opted for privatization and deregulation of the energy sector? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are going to ask the different speakers to respond. Maybe Mrs. van der Hoeven, could you start? I mean, we had the questions of the cooperation of Central Asia with Eurasian Customs Union, and the question, the specific question about Belarus, on the positioning of partner countries which have a strong public involvement vis-à-vis the renewable, and also the question of renewables on wind. So 3 questions for you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much. When we look into the countries' relationships with Russia, with the European Union, and etc., we see that Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine have already signed accession agreements in June 2014 in place. We see that the EU's relationship with others Farai. We see that the Commission continues its programs both bilaterally and also for the regions, so through numerous assistance programs. I think that those are good things. Eurasian Union is a reality in the region, and with 4 countries already on board and with some others aiming to join soon. However, and I think that is actually the most important thing, there is no reason for the countries in the Eurasian Union or in the accession countries to the EU, as well as those not aligned with either union, to not work together, to continue to develop regional cooperation within the region that is needed. Because, you know, it's the same in the EU. If there's no, for instance, a Northwestern European electricity market, there is a regional market. They are cooperating there. So I think it's important that whether you are in one, in the other, or in none, that you see what you can do together in the region. And technically, this could potentially be challenging in terms of market alignment and harmonization. And that's why we would recommend a strong cooperation between the countries to work on developing as closely harmonized markets as possible. So I think that's part of my answer to you. That is my answer to you. The second thing, what comes next? Well, as you know, we are an organization with 29 member countries, and the work we do for other countries is always based on a voluntary contribution. It works like that. On the other hand, and that also brings me to the renewables, what is very important is that countries can join our implementing agreements. We have 41 implementing agreements, and at this moment, just as an example, China is member to 19 of them. And they are doing that because it's in their own interest. They are on renewables, they are on fossils, they are even on nuclear fusion. So this is an opportunity to be part of the worldwide technology network, to get access to knowledge and to get access to technology. That is why countries are doing that. So this is one of the things that could be offered from our side, regardless of what money there would be. This is something that we can do anyhow. So I would strongly advise you to look into that opportunity and see what is interesting for your country. And if you want to know more about that, Sonja is here, Thea is here. They can tell you how to get that and be part of that international technology network. It's on technology, it's on energy efficiency, and it's on varied issues. Then about the renewables. What strikes me about renewables is that some still think that they are expensive. Well, we have seen the cost of the solar panels coming down dramatically in the past few years, and they will come down even more. We have seen technology developments in solar and in wind power generation that are enormous. And that means that the efficiency of this renewable generation is much better than it was. We also see that we have large hydro power systems. For instance, in many of your countries, we have the large hydro systems. There are still large hydro systems being built everywhere in the world, but we see at the same moment that small hydro is now come into place. And that's really very important for having this, well, to make use of the hydropower whenever there is a smaller amount. You can't build the big dams. We have seen that the use of biomass is really coming up more than it was. Now, the most important thing is, when you're talking about these renewables, that many of them are intermittent. Sometimes the sun is shining, sometimes not, sometimes the wind is there, sometimes it's not. So it's important to have a solid policy on investment and not to do retroactive adjustments of the policy, because that doesn't help. It didn't help in Spain, it didn't help in the UK. There are examples of that. So have a solid policy in place. Whatever system it is, it doesn't matter whatever system it is. You need to have a solid and stable policy for the investment. And you need to prioritize the integration of the renewables into your grid. And this is something that at this moment is really problematic also in some parts of Europe. Let me just give you one example. In Spain, they produce an enormous amount of wind and solar energy, but it's very difficult to export that amount of solar energy to France because of the interconnection. So you have to look into your interconnection. You have to look into how to prioritize the renewables into the grid. And this is something that, well, it needs planning, and it needs sound data, and it needs a real good cooperation, not only within the country, but also especially with others, with the neighboring countries. Germany can only go for this Energiewende because of the neighbors, because of the integration in Europe. Otherwise, they couldn't do it, because their interconnection between the north, where the windmills are, where the wind turbines are, and the south is relatively weak. So look into how you can cooperate together at a regional scale, with or without, and it doesn't matter what kind of policy, what kind of political structure that you have. The biggest point is how to make use of each other's strengths. And then my last remark on the renewables. Some think low yield, high risk. Well, the high risk, you can do something about. And the highest risk is policy for investors, because they cannot influence policy. So you have to see that you have a stable policy. And the second thing is see to it that you make the choice that goes best with your country. If you want to spend a lot of money on solar energy and you don't have the real solar intensity, then it will cost you a lot of money. But on the other hand, maybe you don't have solar, maybe you have wind, or maybe you have geothermal, or you have hydro, or you have biomass. You can choose the right choice. And my last remark is on materials. It's not only about solar panels anymore. It's also about building materials. It's about new kinds of glass. It's about new technologies. And that's why I offer you, well, please join our implementing agreements and get the knowledge that you can find there. It's free.
Thank you. On the question of Iran.
Yeah, thank you. First, I can only underline what Maria van der Hoeven just said on regional cooperation. I think something we have in our Energy Union strategy paper underlined very, very strongly that, for example, for the electricity market, one member state cannot do it alone. It needs to be interconnected. And one approach of doing it is to look at the neighbors like Germany with Poland and others, or Spain, which is weakly interconnected electricity with France. It's one of the key priorities to look at regional cooperation, not from a national, but from a pan-national, including different member states, and then go to the European market at the end, obviously. But this regional approach in both electricity and gas is obviously something very key also within the EU. And then the question for Iran, thank you very much. I think we have to see a little bit how it evolves. It's a key step after 12.5 years of negotiation. It's a key success for the EU and the US to have reached that agreement at political level. I've spoken a couple of days ago to one of the negotiators. There are still a couple of technical things to be clarified. It will take a few weeks at least, or month even, to have it all settled and all the detail and technical work. But the deal is done politically, so it's more the implementation. And then obviously the sanctions will be lifted in the coming weeks and months with it. And as Iran is a key oil and gas producer, they have the 4th biggest oil reserve in the world, and it's the biggest natural gas reserves in the world. That will obviously change the geopolitical energy picture, but we have not yet assessed that fully. I mean, it has huge potential, as I said, in oil and gas. We have to see what are the next steps, how it will impact. One thing for me personally is certainly on the oil price development. We have seen since June last year a drop from $110 to $55 a barrel. Right now, we have done some analysis. We have talked to IEA and others that this will probably, as far as we can see it, remain at a rather low level. With Iran now coming into the picture, this probably confirms that oil prices will remain at a relatively low level for the time being. But we don't do any, what your question was, any preference treatment to one or the other now. We have to see how things develop with the negotiation and when the sanctions are completely lifted, how that involves. But we don't change our position vis-à-vis Turkmenistan or other central countries. We remain committed as we are now, so there's no change on that. But in a geopolitical terms, we have to see how the energy picture will evolve. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for a second round of questions or comments? Yes.
Una Shortall from the Council of European Energy Regulators, and it's just to express our interest and willingness as regulators also to share our expertise. We have very rich expertise in regional integration in particular, and just to express that willingness.
Thank you, well noted. Yes, Belarus.
I have a question concerning one particular agreement on interconnection of the Baltic grid with the grid of the European Union. Belarus and Russia were involved into the negotiations, I think, until the end of 2013, when those talks were kind of put on hold because of the position of the Baltic states. They needed some time in order to kind of make some internal adjustments, as far as I know. On the other hand, I know that there were several meetings recently involving energy ministers of the 3 Baltic states and the Commission, following which there was a clear message that, well, this process should go ahead. So can the Commission kindly share what is the outlook for this particular agreement, and are the talks likely to restart anytime soon? Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? No? I think it's more for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Certainly the 3 Baltic states on electricity are completely synchronized with the Russian system. They are not synchronized with the Western system, and that we have done some studies and so on, and we have created the group which we call BMIP on electricity, how to can come over. It will come, but it will take time, and it's costly. They have done some studies for 2022, 2023, but that it involves technical and investments to be synchronized with the Western. So this is one aspect which will take time, but it will be done sooner or later when there is agreement also between the 3 Baltic states, because 2 of them are more committed than 1. So there needs an agreement, but there's still the strong wish to be synchronized with the Western system as soon as all technical and financial problems are solved. I think this will go ahead, but not tomorrow. It will take time. On the Belarus-Russia-Baltic state agreement, my knowledge is that there's no immediate meeting foreseen for the time being, but I'm happy to double check. But for the time being, it's also nothing foreseen in terms of new commitments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So if there are no other questions except from the press, then we will ask Gerhard to make the concluding remarks. Sorry, there is another question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it was a very dense, rich and enriching morning that we had here. And I would like to thank all of you for your participation. I would consider that we have a good basis for a common understanding. A common understanding that there is a lot that still needs to be done. So, for instance, in the area of regional cooperation, but it's equally a clear demonstration what we can take out of enhanced cooperation. Enhanced cooperation not just between the countries in this wider region, which we can potentially subdivide in 3 sub-regions, but which I would consider to be one single broader region, but equally the cooperation with our partners in international or regional organizations. And I think one reply to one of the important questions, what comes next, is essentially we should continue pushing for an even stronger regional cooperation and for an even stronger link between the work of the individual partners that are there, sharing our know-how, sharing data, sharing the results of our analysis provides the basis for the path into the future. And for the European Commission, we can clearly say that the area of cooperation in the energy field with that region remains to be very, very high on our list of priorities. As expressed already before in the context of the energy union, which of course has an external dimension, but equally as part of the renewed and reviewed European neighborhood policy, covering 6 of the 11 countries, but I would dare saying equally in the cooperation with Central Asia. So the attention will be there, the support will be there, and as was said by Mrs. van der Hoeven, we should not just look at financial support. What matters much more is the political support, is the support through sharing advice, sharing best practices, having access to recipes for success that have been implemented in one or the other country already. So for instance, while we talk about modernization and adaptation of the legislative framework, countries do not have to start from scratch. We have ample experience and examples that we can share. And there the role of the Energy Community Secretariat, for instance, is very important. And by making available the information, the recipes, the approach, I think we can already promote that kind of regional cooperation. We have also seen that there is an enormous potential in the 11 countries that can be used for domestic purposes, but that would equally be to the advantage of the European Union. The European Union, as a net importer of energy, the more the potential is developed in our partner countries, the better we are off as well. And since we are interested in improving the relations, I think we can equally hand back something and provide something, a stable framework for demand, a stable framework for promoting regional cooperation, a stable framework for helping to modernize and improve the situation in the partner countries. And I think that is equally important because we talk about sound decision making. We are talking about predictability and stability in order to allow investors to come into the countries, helping to tap into the existing potential. And I think we have all a common interest in creating that kind of stability and predictability. And if we do it together, we will be successful. And that is a confirmation of the value of this kind of cooperation. And this should help us when we talk about the planning for the future. And in my view, the report and the presentations today and the questions and answers that we heard demonstrate that we have much more than just food for thought. It's not just about the thinking. I think it's about preparing the implementation. And that is the real value added of the work undertaken by the International Energy Agency and the groundwork that paved the way for it done by INOGATE. That we have now a real solid basis for preparing the decisions for the future, for making sure that we have this stable and predictable environment which will be conducive to investors coming in because they see an opportunity there as well. And I would like to thank all of the partners involved. Of course, first and foremost, the International Energy Agency, you, Mrs. van der Hoeven, but in particular, Mrs. Kitarishvili, sorry for mispronouncing your name, and Mrs. Sonja Lekovic. I would like to thank equally the INOGATE Technical Secretariat and in particular Mr. Andriy Mitsai and Mrs. Irina Arishenko. I would like to thank our colleagues in DG Energy, starting with Mechtit Wörsdorfer, but equally Marion Schiller-Probst present here, and Federico Tarantini. And last but not least, within DG NEAR, of course, Mathieu Bousquet and his team, in particular Natalia Miolato and Viola Calabrese, equally present here today. And I would not end this without pointing out to the future by saying this is not a single event. This is not the only show for presenting this very important piece of work. We will see additional events in the region covered, which will be organized jointly by the IEA, INOGATE, and the EU delegation. And there will be presentations in Chisinau on the 15th of April, so on Wednesday, in Tbilisi on the 17th, end of the week, and in Astana on the 24th of April, so next week. I think I would wish that this very important piece of work attracts wide attention, and I would encourage all of us around the table to make the appropriate publicity and to draw the attention of key persons to it, because it is so rich, it is so helpful, and it will provide us insight that will be helpful for the future. With that, I would like to wish you a very good day. For those who would now like to have coffee, I think there is coffee outside the meeting room. And for those who would still get some food for thought, some sound bites or some replies for the media, you can stay in this room and ask your questions, and we will stay a little bit for that as well. So once again, thank you very much, and have a very good day.